How do you this one? What did he say? I think there's one.
We got it yesterday.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So our scheduled business this morning, we'll start with consideration of the draft June 2019 board minutes, which board members have received and are posted on the board's website. Will a board member move for a vote to approve the minutes?
Second.
Are there any edits or comments? So I think we'll move to a vote to approve the June 2019 minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
So today is my last meeting here with the board, and I wanted to just give an update to everybody about where we're at in the process. The board has formed a committee that includes Chair Sherman, Vice Chair Richards, Member Cohen, and Member Hamill to oversee the search for my replacement. They expect to very soon hire a search firm to lead that process. Michelle Ovesey, the board's general counsel, will serve as acting executive director, and Emily Turner is now acting deputy executive director, and I thank them for stepping up very much to ensure smooth transition. I want to, before I go, thank the mayor's office and the city council, in particular Speaker Johnson and members Powers, Strom, Rivera, Ayala, and Rosenthal for their increased attention to the conditions in our city's jails, as well as their increased support of the board's role and work. I must extend my gratitude to the leadership and the teams and the staff at CHS and DOC, and in particular Commissioner Brand and Chief Jennings and her team, and Senior Vice President Yang, for your ongoing collaboration and your commitment to the board's oversight and its role here. Thank you also to all the people who come here each month and speak to us. You've given me invaluable guidance as well as invaluable guidance to the board's work in recent years. I want to thank the board, of course, for your support of me and of the board staff and of our growing impact. And finally, of course, to the board staff, I'm extremely proud of what you have achieved in the past few years. I'm humbled by what you do every day, by what you contend with, and I'm looking forward to supporting your mission from a different and new vantage point. I'm proud to say that the board is still in good hands with the staff, and so onward we go.
Thank you, Martha. And I haven't been on the board for all that long, but I know that when Martha came to the board in June of 2015, she took on a seriously tough challenge. The board had a majority of new members at the time. The agency had seen a number of recent leadership transitions, and public expectations for board-led jail reform were high. At the time, the board had 16 staff members, a budget of $1.6 million, and a proud tradition of jail oversight. In the past 4 years, Martha has doubled the board's budget and staff and led a resurgence of the board's work. She jumped in and led the board through rulemaking on visiting, packages, classification, recreation, and segregation. She then led the board through a rulemaking process to adopt the first new chapter of the minimum standards in 25 years, rules designed to detect, prevent, and respond to sexual abuse and sexual harassment of people in custody. She led us through rulemaking on injury prevention that will result in a vote today, and she initiated rulemaking on restrictive housing. In her 4 years at the board, Martha greatly expanded the board's efforts at transparency, research, and public reporting, leading to evidence-driven policy and raising the profile of the board at the local, state, and national levels. In 2018, the board released 25 reports on issues such as visiting, lockdowns, healthcare access, injuries, grievances, violence, and investigations. This is more than double the number of reports issued by the board in 2014 and 2015 combined. Finally, Martha led her staff and this board through rapid change in the agency and in the jails, and she did so with professionalism, dedication, conviction, grace, empathy, and care. Thank you, Martha. And I'm now going to call on Freya Rickrink from the Mayor's Office, who would like to make a presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair. And on behalf of the Office of the Mayor, we wanted to present Martha King with a proclamation in recognition of her service to the board and to the city. She will be greatly missed.
Yes.
And I'm going to read the proclamation into the record. Whereas New York has no shortage of devoted public servants who empower its residents and forge its bright future, and our talented workforce is a source of pride for the 5 boroughs, these individuals make a positive impact on our city every day and are vital partners in forging a path to a better tomorrow for their fellow New Yorkers. Throughout her professional career, Martha King has embodied this tremendous spirit of giving back to our city, and I am proud to join with her colleagues and friends in congratulating her on her exemplary service. Whereas throughout her tenure as Executive Director for the New York City Board of Correction, Martha has played a crucial role in guiding its mission to regulate, monitor, and inspect our city's 12 correctional facilities. Under her leadership, the board has more than doubled its budget and staff, issuing its first new regulation in 25 years and launching a groundbreaking data transparency initiative with reports that have included the first public audits of city jail conditions. From launching her career at CASES, the oldest and largest alternative to incarceration program in New York City, to serving as a senior policy analyst to the first deputy mayor, Martha has remained firmly dedicated to strengthening our criminal justice system while moving our city forward. Making our city a fairer and safer place is one of my administration's most crucial tasks, and Martha's careful leadership at the BOC has helped to make this vision a reality. Her integrity, professionalism, and knowledge will continue to inspire her colleagues, and her experience and valuable insight will be sorely missed by everyone at the board. Today, I'm proud to add my voice to the chorus of well-wishers in celebrating everything that Martha has accomplished throughout her tenure and offer my very best wishes for continued success. Now, therefore, I, Bill de Blasio, Mayor of the City of New York, do hereby proclaim Tuesday, July 9th, 2019 in the City of New York as Martha King Day.
Thank you. I believe that there are a few members who would like to say a few words.
I'd just like to make just a brief appreciation of Martha. You heard from Jackie and Freya the tremendous accomplishments that she's done. You know, raising a budget is important, but what do you do with it is really the most important thing. And I think what Martha, you know, with her colleagues has been able to accomplish in terms of what the staff, you know, do and what she leads them to do is extraordinary. Every job is difficult. Every job is very, you know, in most, you know, jobs that are worthwhile are really hard. But the ED of the Executive Director of the Board of Correction is a particularly interesting job. You have to negotiate with the City Hall. Thank you, Freya. And you have to negotiate with the Department of Correction. And you have to negotiate with Health and Hospitals Corporation, and you have to try to build support. And the board. I'm going to get to the board. That's the tough one. You know, and and City Council and SCOC and then the Hydra, the 9-headed Hydra. That's the Board of Correction, and she did it. You know, and I made it really hard for her. So. And I'm just proud to what she's accomplished and to be her friend. And thank you, Martha.
What I appreciate about the time that you've served in this role and your tenure is that you've always moved and acted with integrity and sincerity, concerned about all who walk through our city's jails on a daily basis, both the detainees and the staff, and the Board of Correction as well, and I appreciate you, as well as the visitors. I'm reminded in this moment as I listen to all of the accomplishments, and I consider them myself during this very short stint in many ways. I'm reminded of the words of my dad, who would often tell his children, your responsibility in life is to find a field and leave it better than you found it. You certainly found this field and left it better than you found it. Thank you.
Comments. I know we have a really, really busy agenda, but I have to say I'm very sorry that Martha is leaving. I had the pleasure of being on the search committee that identified Martha as the best candidate. She far exceeded my expectations during that interview. You've accomplished more than I ever thought was imaginable. And you did it with such grace. I mean, the mayor's even got a proclamation for you. And look at how much you've accomplished. And that means having really worked very closely, and sometimes adversarial with the city. I've had a lot of positions and I've worked in a lot of jobs. I have never seen a job as difficult and as challenging as the executive director of the Board of Correction. Now, we have a lot of people sitting in the audience, and I hope some of you all will consider applying. You hear that there's going to be a search committee, but you should know this is an incredibly difficult job, and my sadness is that you've accomplished so much, but there's still so much yet to do. You have left an indelible mark on the Board of Correction and on city corrections, and a wonderful foundation upon which the new executive director will build. So thank you so much. I wish you the best. And it's not too late to change your mind, because Friday's your last day.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Martha, hi. It has been an absolute pleasure. Before you got here, executive directors needed to have a bake sale if they wanted to increase manpower or to address really serious, substantive, thoughtful, complicated issues. And I say this all the time. I'm the longest serving member of the board. I'm here 19 years, I think. And so I've seen a bunch of them. And, I don't mean to besmirch their reputations or to say anything negative here, but you're a classy person. You have led this organization with distinction and with thoughtfulness. And I am really sorry to see you go, and I congratulate you. You're still a very young person. I understand with this certificate you can get on the subway today for free. Congratulations.
Thank you. And thank you again to Martha. And thank you to Michelle and the entire staff at the board for jumping in and helping us through the transition that is to come. Before we begin public comments on the votes on today's agenda, I'd like to give a brief update on the board's restrictive housing rulemaking. In recent days, we've received letters from the City Council's Progressive and Women's Caucuses, Council Speaker Johnson and Criminal Justice Committee Chair Powers, the New York Campaign for Alternatives to Isolated Confinement, the Jails Action Coalition, and the Bronx Defenders, calling on the board to make changes to the minimum standards governing punitive segregation and for additional accountability mechanisms for city jails. These calls come in response to the tragic death of Laylene Polanco in the restricted housing unit, a form of punitive segregation, as well as the state legislature's decision to not vote on the Halt Solitary Confinement Act during the session that concluded last month. We greatly appreciate the engagement and perspectives and welcome additional ideas and comments from all stakeholders. Much of the input we have received is broadly consistent with the board's draft rules on restrictive housing, which are the product of extensive research and fact-finding. The board has shared draft proposed rules with DOC and CHS, and board staff have been meeting with a working group from DOC to discuss the draft rules. We anticipate completing these discussions by the end of this month. Once these meetings have concluded, the committee will finalize proposed rules to publish and present to the full board for a vote. We anticipate that the board will vote to propose rules at a fall public meeting. This vote will start the city's administrative rulemaking process, or CAPA, which will include a comment period and a hearing on the proposed rules. The public will have a full opportunity to submit written comments on the proposed rules, as well as to testify about them at a public hearing. As the rulemaking process proceeds, we will keep you informed as milestones are reached, and we look forward to hearing and considering public comment and testimony on the proposed rules. I should note that the board has created a web page dedicated to the rulemaking, which will be updated and will be prominently linked on the board's homepage. Through the rulemaking, the board will prioritize continued reforms to reduce the use of isolation in New York City jails and ensure that appropriate accountability mechanisms exist to keep everyone who lives, works, and visits city jails safe. The Rulemaking Committee on Restrictive Housing will meet later this month to review comments we have received to date and determine next steps. I'd also like to update you on the board's investigation into the recent death of Layleen Polanco in custody at the Rose M. Singer Center. The board is in the midst of its investigation, including reviewing all relevant documents and video from the Department of Correction. We have requested a judicial subpoena so that we can access Ms. Polanco's complete medical records. We appear in court later this month. We are also awaiting the results of the medical examiner's autopsy. We have been informed that this could take 90 days. The results of the autopsy are critical to our and all of the ongoing investigations here, and we have strongly urged the city to expedite this process and to transparently release those results as soon as possible. Once we have the medical record and autopsy, we will update you again as to our timeline for releasing our findings and recommendations stemming from this investigation. Next, we will hear from members of the public who would like to address today's... Sure.
I don't think, yes, it is. All right, thank you so much for your comments, Jackie, and thank you so much for agreeing to be our interim chair as we move forward. As we've heard, Martha's accomplished a great deal, and there's still much to come. I just wanted to speak on the issue of the rulemaking for a moment, because I've had an opportunity, as have my colleagues, to have read all the letters that have been sent to us recently, and just so that everybody is sort of on the same page and aware, the board I proposed the resolution, which was adopted by the board back in 2016, to commence restrictive housing rulemaking regarding restrictive housing, including reviewing punitive segregation. PREA took priority, which it should. That was very, very important to complete PREA. And so we started in earnest in 2017. We've had a lot of fact-finding meetings, met with many experts. It's very comprehensive. It will be a new chapter, and our staff have worked really hard, led by Martha and Michelle, to draft some proposed rules. As you can imagine, it's been lengthy discussions with the city with respect to the rules. That doesn't preclude us from starting the CAPA process. We see that the State Commission has actually been more progressive and passed some rules that the City Corrections is now bound by. Much of those are in our proposed rules. So at this point, thank you very much for the timeline. I think it's really important that the proposed rules come to the full board for a vote so we can start the CAPA process, schedule the hearing, hold the hearing, and try to get these rules in effect. Obviously, those of you who have submitted letters will have an opportunity, if you wish to meet in advance or certainly during the CAPA process. But given the amount of time that's gone by, given all the changes that have occurred in the area, it's really important that we try to complete this work as timely as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will hear from members of the public who would like to address today's 5 variance votes and the board's vote on new proposed rules that address patient privacy and injury response and surveillance. We ask that speakers limit their comments during this period to these topics and to 3 minutes. We will have an additional public comment period on all other matters to close today's meeting, and the iPad on the stage will tell you how much time you have left. First, I'd like to call on Abigail Bessler from Councilmember Power's office.
Hello, I'm Abigail Bessler, Councilmember Keith Powers' Legislative Director. First, I want to thank you, Executive Director King, for all the work you've done and guidance you've given our office on many bills that we've passed through the Council. I'm here today to read a letter from Councilmember Powers, who is chair of the Council's Criminal Justice Committee, and Speaker Corey Johnson, which was sent to the board on June 27th. We write today to urge the Board of Correction to update its standards on punitive segregation and conduct a review of solitary confinement with an aim toward ending the practice. The recent death of Laylene Polanco, a young transgender woman of color held in solitary confinement on Rikers Island, highlights the urgent need to reform our current system of restricted housing. This tragedy reflects the broader failure on the part of the city to address the harmful effects of solitary confinement on incarcerated individuals' mental health, physical well-being, and humanity. We ask the BOC to pass new rules implementing the Humane Alternatives to Long-Term Solitary Confinement Act, HALT, on the local level. As of now, incarcerated individuals can be placed in solitary confinement for a maximum of 30 consecutive days or 60 days over a 6-month period. HALT, which failed to pass through the state legislature this session, would cap the amount of time an individual can spend in punitive segregation at 15 consecutive days or 20 days in a 60-day period. Additionally, while the BOC has already prohibited solitary for individuals under 21, thanks to your leadership, there are still several categories of people who can be placed in solitary confinement, including pregnant women, new mothers, and people 55 years of age or older. We must work to prevent these vulnerable groups from being placed in solitary confinement. HALT would also mitigate the harmful impacts of solitary by increasing the amount of time incarcerated individuals can leave their cells from 4 to 6 hours a day. This change would not only make our jails more humane, it would also make them safer. Solitary confinement causes individuals to experience heightened anxiety, irritability, confused thought processes, hallucinations, and suicidal thoughts. As a result, incarcerated individuals held in solitary are more likely to harm others or themselves when they return to the general population. The fight to end solitary confinement has broad support from international bodies and human rights organizations. The United Nations has called solitary confinement a form of torture and prohibited it under its standard minimum rules for the treatment of prisoners. The New York Civil Liberties Union advocated for its complete abolition. In light of this support, the BOC should take stronger, more decisive measures to put an end to a practice that is widely condemned by the international community. We want to underscore that we take the safety of the officers and staff in New York City jails very seriously and understand that many view solitary confinement as necessary to preserve that safety. That is why we believe the BOC should continue to permit some limited form of isolation for those who pose a real danger to or commit violence against others. However, the extent of this isolation must be consistent with international standards, and time spent in this form of housing must focus on addressing the issues underlying these individuals' behavior. The BOC should examine how to go beyond the short-term goal of isolating an individual from others to the long-term goal of preventing any future violence. New York City should be a leader in creating a humane jail system. Solitary confinement is a cruel and unusual punishment that inflicts great harm upon individuals, the clear majority of whom have only been accused and not convicted of any crimes. It is time to send a message to the state that we will not stand for a system that does not uphold human rights and dignity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll now call on Francis Gatellis.
Hi. My name is Frances Gatellis, and I'm a clinical psychologist. And since 1993, I've been a member of the Asylum Network at Physicians for Human Rights. doing evaluations of people who've been the victims of torture and persecution. And I'm also a member of CAKE, the Campaign for Alternatives to Isolated Confinement. In my mind, these two things are very closely related, especially given, as you heard, that the United Nations has in fact made it very clear that extended solitary confinement is a form of torture. What we know from, we don't even need them to tell us that, because what we know from experience, from research, from history, is that there are many ways in which the individual is emotionally and psychologically destroyed by extended solitary confinement. So what we have is, for example, the increase in anxiety, the increase in depression, feelings of hopelessness and helplessness, perceptual distortions, increased anger, and loss of the ability to control one's own behavior. And one of the things that hasn't yet been mentioned, there's a lot of research which also shows that extended isolation can in fact damage parts of the brain, causing different structures or chemistry to be disrupted. So in view of all that, sorry. Now, we know all this, and yet we continue to impose punitive segregation. You don't seem to recognize that you're doing very serious harm to individuals that you isolate. It's interesting, in your January 2019 report on serious injuries within the jails, there is no mention of the type of serious injury that I'm talking about. It's as if people are deteriorating and nobody's paying attention, or maybe nobody even cares. Your website says that part of your task, and I think this was mentioned earlier, is to create jails that are safer, more humane. I don't see how, given what we know about the damage you're causing, that you can possibly say that you are creating jails that are more humane. It seems to me that's not happening. So with that in mind, we are asking that the use of solitary confinement be stopped, except maybe as a timeout when there's an emergency situation, but very brief and nothing more than that. And also that there are certain populations that should never be put in solitary. You have youth, the mentally ill, the physically disabled, and the elderly, among others. In order for those kinds of changes to work, though, you also have to work to change the social milieu, the atmosphere in the institution. And that means things like changing the us versus them approach. It means encouraging staff and helping them to behave in ways where they get rewarded for acting in ways that show respect, that show empathy, and that show compassion for the people they are working with. And in addition to that, there has to be training. Right now, it seems to me in so many of our prisons and jails, all we have is this.
Thank you. Please, please wrap up.
I have 2 more sentences.
Please wrap up.
Okay. Solitary confinement must end now. And I have to say to you, as the Board of Corrections, that up to now, unfortunately, you have been accomplices for torture. To torture for much too long, and I respectfully urge you to end your complicity.
Thank you. Alyssa Hine. Alyssa Hine.
Hello, my name is Elissa Hine, and I'm a senior policy analyst at Children's Rights. Regarding the variance for the minimum standard concerning the use of enhanced supervision housing for young adults 18 to 21 years old, Since the ESH variance was first approved on October 11, 2016, the board has extended the variance for 18 to 21-year-olds 6 times. ESH was introduced by the department in response to the phasing out of punitive segregation, but placement in ESH is harmful and inappropriate for young adults. Social science and neurological research that guides best practices for working with older youth shows that younger people under age 25 need both developmentally appropriate services and connections with community. When young adults are placed in ESH, they have few opportunities to build or grow lasting relationships with family and caring adults. Instead, these youth are isolated from beneficial contacts, especially the few existing normalizing activities available in detention. Additionally, the variance fails to address many of the concerns raised in the board's July 2017 report, such as the use of restraint desks in ESH, adolescents and young adult visitation restrictions, access to mental health services, and more. It is especially alarming that the department insists on continuing to use restraint desks in ESH. We therefore urge the board to deny this variance request and instead request that the board set a deadline for the discontinuance of the use of restraint desks and a deadline for the discontinuance of the use of ESH for any young adults at Rikers. Regarding the variance for the minimum standard concerning commingling young adults, 19 to 21-year-olds, with adults 22 and older, we urge the board to deny this variance request, and instead we ask the board to require the department to set a firm timeline for ending commingling and provide access for all young adults to young adult housing, programming, and services. As Children's Rights has previously testified regarding this variance, there are more effective and lasting methods to reduce violence, including an increase in services and age-appropriate programming, as well as continued better training for officers. By placing young adults in commingled housing units, they are effectively cut off from regular access to important programs and services. This could stunt the progress of those young adults housed with adults 22 years and older. In order to justify this practice, we urge the board to require the department to provide research that determines commingling young adults with older adults causes a reduction in violence and increases safety. We also urge the board to ask why the department can ensure the safety of 18-year-olds housed separately, but relies on commingling 19 to 21-year-olds to ensure their safety. Moreover, this variance request is worrisome in light of the Young Adult Plan update's lack of specific uniform processes regarding admission to Rikers. The department states that it will make appropriate effort to house young adult male inmates ages 19 to 21 in young adult-only housing unless, after a case-by-case determination, it is determined that a young adult inmate would be more safely housed in commingled housing. However, it's unclear how these case-by-case determinations are made. We believe that these vital housing decisions must be based on established protocols or evidence-based policy rather than the individual discretion of intake staff. We urge the board to deny both of these variance requests until more specific solutions to the above-mentioned issues are implemented. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to call on Councilmember Carlina Rivera, who represents Manhattan neighborhoods, including the East Village, the Flatiron District, Gramercy Park, the Lower East Side, and more. She is the chair of the Council's Committee on Hospitals and a member of the Committee on Criminal Justice. Good morning, Council Member.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who is here to give their testimony on such important issues and how we can become a fairer, more just, and more humane city. So, dear members of the board, as the co-chair of the Council's Women's Caucus and a member of the Progressive Caucus, I am here representing the position of both caucuses as it relates to solitary confinement. On June 26, 2019, the Progressive and Women's Caucuses of the New York City Council sent a letter to the Department of Correction, the Board of Correction, and the mayor demanding an immediate end to solitary. Our call to end solitary comes in response to the death of a 27-year-old trans woman of color at Rikers. Layleen Polanco spent the last 9 days of her life in solitary confinement until she was discovered unconscious in her cell on June 7th. No person should be required to spend 22 to 24 hours in a cell without meaningful human contact. No person should have to spend 22 to 24 hours a day in a cell without programming or therapy, and it is unacceptable that still in 2019, New York City jails continue to employ the inhumane practice of solitary confinement. This continues despite the wealth of evidence that solitary confinement causes severe psychological, emotional, and physical harm and contributes significantly to recidivism. This council is clear in its advocacy on this issue. New York City Council Speaker Corey Johnson said it best: solitary confinement is torture, plain and simple. And Speaker Johnson and Criminal Justice Committee Chair Keith Powers have also called for the Board of Corrections to update its standards on punitive segregation and conduct a review of solitary confinement with an aim toward ending this practice. Supporters of this practice would claim that solitary is necessary to discourage violent behavior. But multiple studies show that not to be the case, including a 2015 examination that found that those who were disciplined with time in solitary were no more or less violent after the punishment. New York currently imposes such isolated confinement far too broadly, routinely, and frequently in response to nonviolent contact and for far too long a period of time, often months and years. I hope you will consider the caucus's call for an end to solitary confinement at Rikers Island in your rulemaking capacity and continue to embrace evidence-based incarceration policies that are smart, progressive, and humane. New York City should continue to be a leader in reforming the criminal justice system and providing incarcerated people the basic rights that they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Thank you. We look forward to working with you, the Speaker, and your colleagues as the board continues its rulemaking on restrictive housing.
Thank you so much. We're looking forward to working with you.
Mark Steyer.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mark.
I hope this time doesn't count against me. I am here in part to congratulate Ms. King on, stop running, it's running, on her moving on. I hear there might be a spot on the women's U.S. national team, soccer team. We can talk about that at your ticker tape parade tomorrow. Has everyone read the letters that were submitted by COBA on the rulemaking?
Yeah.
Okay, they're in the record. I won't go over any of those. The title of the rulemaking that I'm speaking on is Prevention, Reporting, and Investigation of Injuries. The problem, as outlined in those letters, is that there are a couple of things that got snuck in there that don't have anything to do with prevention, reporting, or investigation of injuries so much as they have to do with changing the role of medical professionals in their forensic capacity to do investigations and assist in the correct prosecution of people who transgress violently in the jails against one another and against members of the civil service, uniformed and not. COBA was the only organization to testify at the rulemaking meeting on the 20th of June because possibly this wonderfully innocuous vanilla title can't possibly be objected to by anyone, since we know that the Department of Corrections and CHS numbers don't even use the same geographic plane. So I've tried over the years to use ethos, pathos, logos. I haven't tried eros nor mentos, and I haven't called George Soros. But every time that we ask for something to be put off, it seems as though it's rushed through. Just today, you've said with regard to the restrictive housing, that because of a lot of concerns, some letters that came in from some advocate groups that absolutely overlap with one another in membership, you'll be putting that off into the fall. I would just ask that you consider doing that in this case as well, so that we can do some real investigation into some of the best practices that have been adopted in other jurisdictions. In closing, I would note there is, in fact, a letter in your inboxes from the acting district attorney in Queens requesting the same thing that was sent at 8 o'clock this morning. I'm sure none of you got a chance to read that yet. I see my time is running out. I thank the board for its time and its considered reflection on all matters that deal with workers and the incarcerated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jennifer Parrish.
Good morning.
Good
My
morning.
name is Jennifer Parrish. I'm the Director of Criminal Justice Advocacy at the Urban Justice Center Mental Health Project. I've spoken about the 3 variances from the Department of Corrections before and urged you to vote against them. I do so again for all of the same reasons. But I also want to say, instead of allowing for exceptions to your rules regarding punitive segregation, the department's name for solitary confinement, this board needs to adopt rules that prohibit solitary confinement completely and that regulate all forms of restrictive units where individuals are locked up for more than 14 hours a day and are placed in units so small that their out-of-cell time is nothing more than time in a slightly larger cell with 1 or 2 other people. The board voted to begin rulemaking 3 years ago and began that process in earnest more than 2 years ago. I'm encouraged by your update today, but the public still has not seen these proposed rules. Instead, the board continues to extend these variances, and Department of Corrections' power to create other versions of restrictive units is unchecked. So I urge you to reject these variances and begin the rulemaking process. And as the Jails Action Coalition and the Campaign for Alternatives to Isolated Confinement have urged, to end the practice of solitary confinement completely. Solitary confinement is harmful to people's mental and physical health. Our state lawmakers failed to act despite the overwhelming legislative and public support for the Halt Solitary Confinement Act. The board must not do the same. The board must stand up now to protect people in New York City jails from the trauma that's induced by solitary confinement, which can have lifetime consequences. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott Paltrowitz.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm here to speak to oppose the variance request to get around the board limits on solitary confinement. I'm urging the Board of Correction in the City of New York to immediately end solitary confinement fully and completely. This is psychological torture in any way you put it. I spent over 5 years in solitary confinement, but even one day is torture. You know, the scars of solitary confinement has affected me enormously, even though it's been a little over 7 years since I came out of the Department of Corrections. Imagine being stuck in an elevator for hours, let alone days, weeks, months, years, or decades. All day and night, people would be banging on their lock. They would bang on the doors, scream in agony. Politicians talk a lot about having too many people with mental illness in jail and prison, but they have to take ownership of the fact that many people enter these facilities relatively healthy and leave with tortured minds. I was released from prison in 2012, and I still, like I said, I still have the effect of solitary confinement. The board must end solitary confinement now, and you must also make sure that any alternative to solitary or real alternative are not solitary by another name, and that people can quickly have a clear path of the alternative. The alternative should be the opposite of solitary. Instead of isolation and torture, people should be out of their cell almost the whole day and should have meaningful engagement with other human beings and meaningful congregation program to help address why they need to be separated in the first place. The CAPS program in New York City, the now closed Merle Cooper program in New York State, and in San Francisco. All of these examples show that doing the opposite of solitary is what actually works to make jails and our communities safe. Program and empowerment and meaningful human engagement in a real way, not just punishment and isolation. How many more Leilene Polanco, Khalif Browder, Briley Ballards, and so many others are there going to have to be taken before you finally end this torturous environment? Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Vidal Gurman from Just Leadership.
First, my name is Vidal Guzman. I'm a community organizer for the Close Rikers Island campaign. I've been a part of the Close Rikers Island campaign for the last 3 years since it first started. I came in as that person who was impacted by the raise the age, tried as an adult at 16 years old. A little bit about me, altogether I did 7 years incarcerated at 16, 17, and then 19 till I was 24. I was in solitary confinement 2 to 2.5 years. I'm also, a lot of people know who was in the advocacy world, I was a former high-ranking member of the Bloods. And one of the things I first want to start, there comes to a certain point of how many people do we have to lose until we're saying solitary confinement is a conditions that you don't even put dogs in. How many people do we have to lose until we are saying the words of Brian Stevenson that we're sending broken people to a broken system? So why are we sending broken people to solitary confinement? I met people in my neighborhood who had did 19 to 20 years in solitary confinement. We also know that a brain doesn't fully develop to 25. I'm still feeling the impact of being in solitary confinement. On a daily basis, having conversations with my coworkers, still have bad memory of what solitary confinement actually did to me. When I was in solitary confinement, at one point, I got injured where my finger was actually jammed, and I will not get at a certain point, I wasn't getting no medical assistance. So I told everyone at the chair that we was in, when I was in solitary confinement, I waited for the sergeant to actually come and tell him, hey, man, I just got, my finger is jammed. My finger was bent the whole way to my hand. It was like badly hurt, and they ignored it. So I told people around the chair, people who was Crips, Lion Kings, different gang members, people who was Muslims, about what was happening with me. And what we did was organize a hunger strike until I got medical attention. So it comes to a certain point, it's not about safety, it's about looking at human beings as human beings. We are in an important moment right now. Every single one of y'all has a choice to think about what it means to be a human being and how do we look at human beings. And we heard many different things about the underlayers of what lands people into solitary confinement. We have to be crucial and take the point of ending solitary confinement. How many people do we have to lose into we can look in the mirror and say, I was a part of ending solitary confinement? How many people of myself that still feels the impact of solitary confinement? One of the things that I learned about Rikers Island is that just because that person leaves Rikers, that doesn't mean Rikers left them. And Rikers has not left me. Rikers has not left a lot of individuals. It's time. We can't wait. We can't end solitary confinement. If you're serious about caring about people, this is the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Guzman. Roger Headley.
Good morning. My name is Jack Davis, and I'm formerly incarcerated, and I'm speaking for Mr. Headley. I have a question before I even go any further. I want to ask the board, and I want to ask corrections. Why does it take a life to be taken for y'all to come to this conclusion? Y'all want to find out what happened. Y'all knew what happened all the time. Y'all know what's going on all the time. Solitary confinement is a mental health problem. It's a serious problem. Y'all don't want people coming back in your communities that's mental health because they was in solitary confinement. And a lot of the corrections that's sitting here come from out of these same communities that a lot of these guys and women that's in prison is in these prisons. A lot of the board members, y'all have not even sat down and talked with nobody that's formerly incarcerated, somebody that's actually affected, their families that's affected behind solitary confinement and the conditions and the way they come home. If you've never actually seen a person come home, he goes in straight and comes home and he's got downtrodden, obsessive convulsion. He's schizophrenic, pathoschizophrenic. When you sit down, don't just be a member of a board, I'm asking you. Don't just be a correction officer. What I need you to do is sit down and actually talk to the human being and find out what's going on with them. Because being in the cell 24 hours, sometimes 20, not just 23 hours, it's 24 hours. Because if you're not liked by the staff, you don't come out. You know what I'm saying? If you're not liked by the staff, you don't get a shower. If you're not liked by the staff, you won't eat. You understand? But what I need from y'all, don't just come together because we lose a life. Because all you doing is just making it look good for us. What we need you to do is actually come to a conclusion, and we need corrections. Actually, instead of you just getting on the radio and telling about what's going on every weekend, y'all need to start talking to the advocates and find out what's going on. Because it ain't just, because y'all are from the same communities. Y'all come from out of the Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan. Y'all ain't just moved to Staten Island. Y'all ain't start moving there until later on. And the board members, and as for the board members, those that are formerly incarcerated, what I ask for y'all is, just don't make this look good or make this look pretty. Because there's a problem. And the problem is this. People's going inside and dying. You know what I'm saying? What can you tell a parent? What can you tell somebody's brother that their son or daughter's dead? What do you tell a 16-year-old kid you putting him in the box because his behavior is erratic? Or what do you tell a 50-year-old man because a 25-year-old officer told him he was going to do this, that, and other to him? And he feels disrespected. And about the whole bill was meant for staff and prisoners. It was safety for both. And I commend the gentleman that wrote the whole bill, Mr. Scott Powers, for writing the bill and bringing it to the attention of the men and women that kept ignoring everything that was going on inside prisons. We know that criminal justice is a very hot item right now. Only reason why y'all meeting is because everybody's talking about criminal justice. Just don't meet. Just don't come up here and want to listen to what people got to say. Just don't want to hear people because they telling you what happened. I'm a formerly incarcerated. I did 30 years. And I think about it every day. And I still have friends in there I correspond with. But I need y'all, instead of y'all acting like y'all have empathy, I need y'all to really start looking at what's going on. Because that ain't the first death that happened. And it wasn't the second death that happened. It was a whole lot of deaths that happened, and y'all ignored it. So just don't stand there and say, well, solitary's this, and solitary's that, and solitary's this, and solitary's that. No. I'm looking at it from both angles, the correction angle, and I'm looking at it from the prison angle. And I'm asking all of y'all in here that's against it, I'm asking y'all to actually come together and use common sense. Because you're a correction officer, you ain't better than me. You understand? Because you on the board, you're not better than me.
Mr. Davis, please wrap up.
Thank you, but I need y'all to actually get it together, please.
Thank you. Victor Herrera.
Hi, my name is Victor Herrera.
Good morning.
Sorry, don't mind my appearance. I rode all the way from Brooklyn on the bike. Solitary confinement. I'm glad I'm here today because I had a very traumatic experience with solitary confinement in both my incarcerations. My first incarceration, I actually spent almost 2 years in solitary confinement on Rikers Island, all because I became a jailhouse lawyer. as an advocate in Rikers Island, I was a target. And because of solitary confinement's availability, it was an opportunity for the corrections department to use it, okay, against us. Mental health, well, as traumatic as it can be, yeah, I went through being starved, denied showers, even denied 1 hour recreation, all on account of correctional officers either being spiteful or just deciding that they didn't want to do their job, okay? Solitary confinement is not a place for human habitation, not at all, okay? I sympathize with the corrections in terms of, what they are faced with sometimes, but at all times, its availability allows them to take advantage of the opportunity and confine many of the detainees for long periods of time, all with the intent to cause trauma. And that intent is not something that us as a society should be having as available. The Department of Corrections and this commission needs to shut down solitary confinement and look for alternative means, therapeutic means, okay, to treatment. Just because it's a jail doesn't mean that there's no means of treating the trauma that individuals go through, okay? Even the trauma that we go through when we go through Rikers Island comes with us from the outside, okay? Decades, experience, homelessness, hunger, no jobs, So those are the traumas we go through. Does DOC even understand that when we go through as correction officers? Do they understand that? No, they don't. They'll treat us as outcasts, as animals. And they'll cage us in cages within another cage. Solitary confinement needs to end, and it needs to end immediately. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We're going to move on to the next agenda item. Next, the board will vote on a final rule regarding patient confidentiality and injury prevention. So I'll just briefly summarize the context and that rule now. These rules were developed in response to the board staff's January 2019 report, which found that in 2017 there was an 81% discrepancy between the number of serious injuries diagnosed by CHS and the number of serious injuries reported by the Department of Correction. We also found systemic problems in investigating, monitoring, and preventing injuries in the jails. The board voted to start the CAPA process at its May 14th public meeting and held a public hearing on June 20th. Thank you to DOC, CHS, COBA, and Legal Aid for providing feedback during that process. We've made modifications in response to comments. We then posted a final rule on July 2nd, and the board intends to vote on those today. The new rules seek to first allow CHS to share with DOC specific diagnoses related to injuries sustained by people while in custody and thereby support investigations and prevention. The rules also address the deficiencies identified in the serious injury report by requiring DOC and CHS to comply with surveillance and reporting requirements. Additionally, in recognition of the fact that individuals in DOC custody are people first and the circumstances of their incarceration is not their defining feature, the board has made a commitment here to employ person-forward language in its standards and general communications going forward. To this end, the board proposes, wherever possible, deleting all references to, quote, inmates in favor of person-first terms, such as people in custody. Finally, under the new rule, CHS would be able to disclose certain individual communicable disease diagnoses when an exposure has occurred at a facility and it's necessary for CHS to engage in contact tracing to protect the health and safety of exposed or potentially exposed people. When such disclosures are made, CHS would be required to inform the board within 24 hours. Very proud to say that these rules establish the most robust and transparent system in the country to monitor and prevent injuries sustained by people in local jail custody. Since we can move on.
So I will open the floor to discussion and for a vote. Does a board member move to open discussion?
Move.
Is there any comments?
Briefly, I support this rule. Injuries that occur in jails are, we talk in hospitals about iatrogenesis, about the fact of the situation of being in a medical environment is causing certain kinds of illness. Well, injuries substantially in jails are prisonogenic. They're caused by the prison, and they have the particular quality of, in a large number of cases, of being preventable. So we have an obligation to identify all serious injuries, and investigate their causes, and this rule will get us towards that.
Thank you. Does a board member wish to move for a vote on the rules?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, we'll move to a vote. Mr. Safer.
Support.
Perina? Hernandez?
Support.
Yes.
Yes. By a unanimous vote, the rules are approved. And I should note, the board will now publish the final rule in the city record, and the rule will go into effect 30 days after publication.
Move on to the next item. Board standards require the department to house 18 to 21-year-olds separately and apart and to provide age-appropriate programming. Young adult housing allows DOC, CHS, and DOE to target resources to allow for access to education, to age-appropriate programming, and to staff who are trained to work specifically with a young person. The department has sought and the board has repeatedly granted a variance on this requirement the past few years. The board's last variance included conditions that reiterated the importance of young adult housing and a young adult plan, and included specifics about the limited circumstances when a young adult may be moved to a housing unit with adults. The conditions allow DOC to commingle a young adult with adults only on a case-by-case basis if the young person is housed in restrictive housing, has engaged in violent or assaultive behavior, or has engaged in other actions that threaten safety inside a facility. When a young person is moved to adult housing, the board's requirements require that the young person be notified as to why, and that the board also be notified as to why. During the pendency of the last variance, the current variance, DOC has faced challenges in putting into place the procedures required to ensure that young adults are only commingled for permissible reasons and are provided notice, and that the board receives accurate and complete reports on the issue. After analyzing administrative data from March 12th through April 29th, we confirmed that there were at least 46 young people who were moved to adult units but were not reported to the board. In recognition of this omission, DOC has committed to providing notification to those young people who didn't receive it and are still in DOC custody. Board staff have been working closely with the department to address these compliance problems and have recommended that DOC implement a centralized routine quality assurance process. DOC has also taken steps to ensure that their staff have a consistent understanding of which units are young adult only units to help improve compliance. DOC will also report this issue, which units are young adult only, to the public going forward. Between January 2nd and June 3rd, the number of young adults in the city's jails decreased by 2%. As of June 3rd, there were 609 young people in DOC custody, and 10% of those young people were in restrictive housing units. In September 2018, only 22% of 19 to 21-year-olds were in young adult housing. But as of June, 68% of 19 to 21-year-olds were in young adult only housing, showing a significant recommitment to the young adult strategy. Since the board's variance vote in February, the percent of young adults in young adult only housing increased from 57% to 68% and peaked in May at 71%. RNDC serves as the DOC's designated young adult jail, where 54% of young adults in DOC custody are housed. 99% of those young people at RNDC are in units that are young adult only units. At the same time, there are 46% of young adults held in jails other than RNDC. Of the 283 young people at those other jails, 67% of them are commingled with adults, and 33% are held in young adult only units. Yesterday evening, I want to note that the board published a major new resource focused on young adults in New York City jails. I want to thank Victor St. John on the board staff for his leadership in developing this. The board's new young adult webpage tracks the implementation of the city's young adult strategy, and nationally it represents the most comprehensive public data on young adults in custody. The webpage presents young adult-specific data on demographics, housing, restrictive housing, correction officer training, programming, education, and access to health care, all specifically focused on the young adult population. We will update the webpage at least annually, and we hope it'll be a resource for the board and for the public and other stakeholders to continue to have data-driven conversations about the treatment of young people in jail. On our agenda today, because of board member concerns, we had also listed cell door locking mechanisms at RNDC on the agenda. And since that is related to this discussion and this variance, I wanted to invite any board members who wanted to introduce this topic or their concerns so that DOC can address those issues when they give their request and update. Member Perino or Member Cohen?
Thank you, Martha.
Thank you.
Recently, we toured RNDC, and concerns came up. Probably, I toured there a month ago by myself, and a lot of staff was concerned about their safety, and I asked why, and they said the cell doors just pop open, and even though they close, they're not secured. Coming from corrections, 27 years, I know, in midnight shifts, and when you think an detainee is secured behind the gate and you're making a tour, and that door just pops open, that's not a safe condition for either staff members or detainees. Detainees that feel they're safe behind the gate can get attacked by other detainees popping out of their cells, popping into their cells when they're not expecting it. So it's an unsafe condition that exists in RNDC, and I was very concerned of it. I spoke to the commissioner. I also spoke to deputy commissioner in charge of the operation, and they told me that they're working on an area where the cells are being replaced as cell doors. Now, I think that's excellent because it's not just putting a Band-Aid on it, they're actually putting new doors in that are totally secure, and it'll keep the place safe. My only concern, and it's a big concern, is that I feel it's not being done quick enough. We have high classification detainees that are in cells that can pop open at any time, and it was witnessed to me and also Dr. Cohen. We'll ask the detainee, could you get out of your cell? Sure, let me see you do it. Okay, close the cell, boom, pops it right open. And it's just really, it's something that we've gotten lucky where we haven't had a serious injury. I don't believe, God forbid a death, but I think it's something that we really have to attack quickly. And Commissioner, you're on the right track. You got the new doors, you got the operation going. But the other day when we toured, it was maybe about 7, 8 o'clock, and there was no one working in the area. So, I would like, just put a, urgency at least a few of the areas where we have the very high classification detainees, get them up and running so we can have a safer environment for staff and detainees. I don't think right now it's 100% safe. I know we're going in the right direction, but if people don't feel safe, nothing else matters. Talking to the officers in RNDC, they're very concerned. But on a positive note, the commissioner put a very good warden there, Warden Caputo. They talk very highly of him. He's out there with the staff constantly identifying problems, identifying detainees that don't want to even be in the program that are causing drama and causing uses of force and unsafe conditions. And it seems like your uses of force are going way down based on the contribution of not only the warden, but the focus that you're putting in that area. We spoke to individuals in intake that determined whether or not someone wants to be in young adult housing, and they were very informative. They were very well picked. We were being told there's like 12 people in the unit. Congratulations on that. I know that costs a lot of money, but that shows your commitment to the young adults. So when the young adult comes in, they're really placed in the right spot. I believe going in the direction you're going in is a great direction. My concern, though, is even with the second walk, that we need to get those cell doors done quicker. I know by the end of the year was a target. Deputy Commissioner Villanova, that's what the initial thing was. But I think we should try whatever it takes to get that going a little quicker, at least for the higher classification guys, just to keep our people safe. And like once again, I said and I always felt, if people don't feel safe, nothing else matters. And I'm sure that's your main concern, Commissioner. I truly do feel that. So I'm hoping that, we can keep our young adults safe, keep our offices safe, and just keep our community safe by just, maybe acknowledging or seeing that, okay, we're going in the right direction, maybe we could speed it up before we say, oh my God, we should have got it done a little quicker. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to, the ex-chief and I went together last week. We went in the evening just because that was convenient. We weren't trying to, be there when staff wasn't. And, we did see a cell door opened in which someone was living. This is a very, very serious issue for all the reasons my colleague stated. And the response that we got from the department when we expressed our concern was that this process will be completed of fixing the doors over 2 years, 6 buildings, 4 months a building. I don't know anything about how to fix this thing, but 2 years seems like an awful long time. And this is an ongoing issue. The department was confronted with this concern by the SCOC, and the monitors for some reason supported your claim that things were safe. And our response was, no one is in a cell where the door opens. That's not true. So I really urge you to review your response to us, which said that within 2 years you're going to address this problem and do it much more quickly. Thank you.
It's just really another opportunity. Sorry for belaboring the point, but we kind of went through all this at GMDC where units were closed, the doors were fixed. That was a big issue when GMDC was the young adult jail. All that got fixed, the Peace Center and the like, and now we're going through the whole same thing again in R&D. See a few years later. So again, it's just regrettable.
Thank you. Would the department present the variance request? Thank you, Commissioner.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to start by reminding everyone that we believe that DOC and BOC have always shared the same overall goals, and that is to run a system that is fair and safe and produces positive outcomes. We are an agency in transition. There's no doubt about that. But the safety and security of those in the department's custody and those who work in the department's facilities will always be our primary concern. I'll provide a brief overview regarding the 3 variances DOC is requesting today, each of which is intricately connected to the safety and security of each of our jails. The first variance is related to housing of young adults aged 19 to 21 years old, specifically permitting some young adults to be housed with adults aged 22 and older. Since before this variance request was submitted, in 2015, the department has worked diligently to improve the environment for young adults in our custody and to maintaining a management approach that supports their safety, educational, and programmatic needs. The ability to house some number of 19 to 21-year-olds with adults aged 22 and up does not lessen the department's commitment in that regard, as we are committed to providing age-appropriate programs and services to all of the young adults in our care. As we articulated in prior hearings, we have pledged to house substantially all young adults in young adult-only housing. As of the end of June in 2019, we had nearly 70% of young adults housed in young adult-only housing units. And this represents a 3% increase since our progress report at the beginning of January of this year. The second variance is related to the use of enhanced supervision housing for young adults aged 18 to 21. ESH is an important tool that enables the department to manage some of its most violent individuals in an appropriate manner to ensure safety without the use of punitive segregation, and in a manner that provides dynamic, in-person delivery of educational and pro-social programming. As of July 1st, there were a total of 15 young adults in ESH. That's less than 3% of the total young adult population. Only one young adult was in ESH Level 1, which is the most restrictive level, and uses the restraint desk during out-of-cell time. By contrast, back in February of this year, there were a total of 25 young adults in ESH housing, with 3 young adults in Level 1. Our success with the use of ESH is the result of consistent hard work, as well as constant communication and collaboration with the members of this board. It's a testament to the hard work of our staff that we have been so successful. We have appreciated your collaborative and collective support during this period of significant groundbreaking reform, including the urging of important changes to the operation of ESH, such as narrowed placement criteria, more frequent reviews, and the presence and participation of the young adult in their own review. These changes support a culture of fairness and transparency and ensure that restrictive housing is only used when necessary. We are committed to increasing safety and eliminating the presence of weapons inside our jails that are used in violent incidents that often predicate placement in ESH Level 1. As we bring ionizing body scanners online in the coming weeks, we will have an increased ability to detect and remove weapons from persons in custody, which may impact the frequency of use of ESH Level 1. The third variance is related to punitive segregation and the ability in highly exceptional circumstances that present safety and security concerns to waive the requirement that people be released for 7 days after they have been held in punitive segregation for 30 consecutive days. And as a reminder, the maximum amount of time that anyone can spend in punitive segregation is 60 days in a 6-month period. While this tool is not often used, in fact, it has only been used once in the past year, it remains an important security tool when all other housing options are rendered unsuitable by an individual's own decision to engage in persistent violent behavior. Thank you for the opportunity to frame the issues we're about to discuss today, and I appreciate your consideration of the continuation of these variances, the incorporation of which are being discussed between DOC and the board as part of the board's restrictive housing rulemaking. Before I turn it over to my staff to make a formal request of the first variance and provide their presentation, I also would like to thank Martha for her hard work and dedication and commitment to the board's mission and goals, and for your collaboration with DOC in creating a safe, humane, fair justice system in the city of New York. I wish you only the best in your future endeavors, and when you're ready to get back to work somewhere, I have several positions open in DOC, so feel free to give me a call. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Timothy Farrell, Senior Deputy Commissioner, Department of Correction, and I'm here to present the request for the 6-month variance on the commingling of young persons in custody. Pursuant to 1-15 of the New York City Board of Corrections minimum standards, the New York City Department of Correction writes to request a 6-month limited variance renewal from BOC minimum standards, which as of February 12, 2019, requires persons in custody ages 18 through 21 be housed separate and apart from persons in custody over the age of 21. The scope of the board's minimum standards is applicable to young adults aged 18 to 21 inclusive. The department is seeking that this variance apply only for young adults aged 19 to 21. This renewal would take effect on the typo here, February 12, 2019, upon the date which the current variance is set to expire. And just to correct that type, it's going to be revised August 12th. That's 6 months.
I'm sure, I think we have a lot of questions. I was at RNDC last week, and the board staff have reported to us on a number of the issues of YA. I am still, and I think the board in general is quite concerned that you have not yet recovered from the movement from GMDC to RNDC. You know, when I saw paved yards without any equipment there, and the response was, well, we bought the equipment, we're going to install it, but people have been there for a year already. So just some very specific questions that I'd like to begin with. When I was there the other day, there was very little programming going on, and we were told that the programs of computers were just involving 3 dorms right now. That there was not a graduated sanctions program, but you couldn't get to get the computers unless you were an honored dorm, and the staff and others were just felt that they did not have what they what we had thought and what we had been told was going to be the young adult program at RNDC, whereas there was a functioning program of programs and education at GMDC, that has not yet been established at RNDC. So I just wonder, when are you going to establish a needs assessment to match the age-appropriate programming for this group, and when are you going to be able to track participation in programming at the individual level? In there are 60 programs that you say are working in RNDC. I assume they're not all working every day. You didn't provide any data for us for who's going, how many times, and you don't even have that information right now. When are you going to be able to provide that with us so we can understand, and you can understand what's going on with the program? Because this is data that you need, not the board needs.
Good morning, board. Deputy Commissioner Mike Tauzik again. Thank you for that question. So as you just stated, sir, over 66 programs are currently active in our NDC. The specific question about the tablets, as we've converted and we're in the transition of moving over to a individual accountability model with the level system, that 3-phase level system with the Honor House, we're in the process right now of implementing the tablet program facility-wide. So during the transition, the previous program was the tablet program was limited to 3 independent levels. That was a silver, gold, and platinum level, versus the new level system that we're implementing now, when we just opened up a new Honors House, and that's going to be the facilitation and delivery of tablets throughout the whole facility. So we're currently, right now, we're doing our testing on our tablets. We just received them from our vendor to ensure that that Pathways program, which is going to be on the new tablets, that the tablets are going to be operational and running. So department-wide, we have approximately 325 tablets for the young adult population. With the delivery of this new supply of tablets, we will soon have tablets for every young adult that's in our NDC as well.
When will that be?
We're incrementally rolling it out, and so we're in the process now of testing all those tablets. So we have over 300 tablets that we have to test to ensure that they are operational. So the Honors House right now, they do have their tablets, and that those tablets will be on a incremental system in terms of enrichment and activities in addition to the education.
When will they be ready?
Well, we're testing them right now to ensure that they are operational and running, so I can have a date for you on that, but they are incrementally being introduced inside the facility. It's a big rollout. It's a huge rollout of over 300 tablets. We want to make sure that they are operational.
Thank you so much. I have a couple of questions. The reports given to us from staff would indicate that there was a drop in terms of the attendance of the young adults in school, down to 27% in June. And it also appears that young people are not getting to their mental health appointments as they've been scheduled. It would appear in the past that there had been a problem with escorts. Can you tell us now why school attendance was so low in June and why attendance at mental health appointments is still fairly low?
I think the attendance issue is something that's stumping all of us, the Department of Education as well as ourselves. Historically, we're looking at an average participation rate of about 30%. That number has not fluctuated that greatly. There hasn't been a great variation in that. And so as I've talked to my staff about doing surveys to determine what's not motivating them to get to school, also with the level system, we hope that through that as well, that in regards to enhanced opportunities in terms of enrichment activities, that'll also compel our young adult population to go to school. As for mental health and for medical appointments, I'll defer to Mr. Caputo, Warden Caputo.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Warden Caputo. I'm the new acting warden of RNDC. I've been assigned there since May 6th. I hope that when you visited, you did see some good changes. Next time I would love to be there to tour with, any of you and welcome any of you to see the facility. A lot of you I've met in the past in my past endeavors in GRBC. I don't know if you remember, but, we made some great changes and strides in great direction in that facility as well. So as far as the actual data for mental health production, I didn't bring it with me. I don't know if we have it as far as the numbers are concerned, but our clinic production rate has greatly increased in June. So the numbers are definitely going in the right direction. And, a lot of that is attributed to the reductions in alarms, which really is the cause of people not getting to where they're supposed to get to. And it's a vicious cycle where, there's a lot of alarms that puts the facility in alarm status. They don't get to go where where they need to go and where they're entitled to get to, and it causes more alarms and more issues and more inmates not getting to where they need to go.
Okay, thank you. Let me just follow up with one question since I have you here, and it's
Yes.
a pleasure to meet you, and I will come out and tour with you. Thank you so much. As I'm sure you know, as the acting warden now, there's been times where the numbers were as high as over 70% of young people were in young adult housing when it was in GMDC at some point. Then it went down very low into the 20s, certainly for the 19 and 21-year-olds, and now it's been going back up. What steps are actually being taken to ensure that young adult housing decisions are consistent with the department's young adult plan, and specifically what steps are being taken to ensure that all young adults moved to the adult housings are moved really for appropriate reasons, and that the young adults receive notice of the reason that they are being commingled with adults?
So all young adults that come into the system, they come into RNDC.
Right.
We're the hub for the young adults, and I'm a proponent and an advocate of the inmates being in RNDC. But there is a very small percentage of them that do not wish to be there, and they wish to be a negative effect on the rest of the individuals, which in turn doesn't allow me to provide all the programs and all the things that we invested so much money in for the young men. So that small group is the ones that we look to now place with the adults, and most of them wish to go with the adults. Now, the process for that, obviously had been a challenge originally, but now working with the SDC, he'll give you the full process. But
thank you.
So when we launched this variance condition back in March, we rolled it out, and with it, we found that we needed to refine it and better communicate and get the message out. It was reminiscent of when we did the uniforms for the detainees several years ago. We had some challenges in getting that consistent application, that consistent follow-through, developing that new muscle memory, so to speak. And that's what we're finding here. But what we've done is we have centralized it so it comes through my office, the request. We have established a central portal, email portal, where all the documents, supporting documents, and the requests to commingle are scanned. My staff review it on a daily basis. We work with the Office of Custody Management, the facility, to see, first of all, are there other options, other young adult cohort housing units that we could place this individual in prior to the commingling. If there's not, if they've exhausted the resources or the housing units based on past behavior, constant manipulation of security equipment, similar to what Mr. Perino had indicated when he was talking to individuals that, you know, they manipulate the cell doors, and if we need to find the appropriate housing unit, and that's what we will do. And then my office will work with custody management and the receiving facility and the sending facility, and we will transfer that individual to the commingled housing unit. We are putting into place a sort of auditing mechanism to ensure that we don't have transfers that take place without the appropriate paperwork. We will be, again, continuing to work with staff, putting out reinforcing direction to this in an effort to get it to a standard that I'm acceptable with and a standard that you need to be acceptable with as well. So we are working with that. I will say that we put a lot of effort before we make a move. Warden Caputo could indicate that we try and exhaust every resource possible from a young adult cohort housing unit before we make that move into a commingled environment. So with this centralized operation, we anticipate a more refined approach in making this happen.
Sort of central to this variance for us is the reporting that we get from the department about young adults and where they're housed, and the commitment to making sure that, you know, X percentage of young adults are housed in young adult housing and so forth. And between March and April, there was a gap in our audit. We found that there was 46 young people who were moved that was housed on Rikers, but wasn't in our reporting. How do we ensure the reporting that's consistent with this variance is maintained at the highest level with accuracy and consistency?
Well, that you raise the concern that I have. That reporting period was initial right after the variance and the conditions went into effect. And that was kind of the, I don't want to say the honeymoon period, but the learning curve of trying to get that policy reinforced to everybody. This was new. You didn't have to fill out paperwork for routine cell assignments or transfers for our population ever before. So this was getting everyone on board, getting the documentation, and being able to track it, and that's where we ran into those issues. We've recognized that. We've implemented this centralized approach in efforts to improve upon it to your satisfaction.
Thank you.
I mean, I've seen a huge refocus, Commissioner Farrell, from just a few months back.
The commitment that you're putting into the young adults, and I'm really happy to see that. Speaking to the officers, they said that once, I believe, custody management makes a decision we can commingle, then the facility has to determine where the person goes by calling different facilities. And what I think of me and Dr. Cohen was we're hoping that custody management would make the determination, okay, this person's going to be commingled, we're going to put him in a particular spot and monitor where that person is, and then maybe try to get that person back in you know, time to come. Maybe we can refocus him or remotivate him to come. And, you know, speaking to the officers, I got to say, Warden Computer, you're doing a great job, because that's what they're all saying. Staff is running up. They're saying that you're in the housing areas, talking to the detainees to see who actually wants to go, who wants to stay, which I think that's important. I think that's why you're seeing a decrease in the uses of force because it's actually you putting your hands on it, and congratulations to that. You know, but going back to what I said, Commissioner Powell, is custody management saying, okay, we approve that this person is going to be commingled, put him in NIC, or put him in OBCC in this particular housing area? You know, are they making that final decision, or is just saying it's going right back to the facility? Because in that case, then the facility has to move them around, and sometimes people, unless you got a number, nobody wants to take your person. And a person who has been determined not to be in young adults might be in that, you know, jail for maybe a few days or weeks or whatever.
Part of that centralized approach is to the ultimate decision and the facility to where the individual will be transferred to will be made through the Office of Custody Management in consultation with our OSIU team to review past behavior issues and other security concerns, and with the facility to find out what they've done to manage that individual within the young adult cohort housing. But the decision and the location will always be assigned through custody management. Unless there's an off-hours emergent situation, that may happen, but part of that review process would take place immediately upon the next business day to ensure and maybe make an adjustment to that transfer as a more permanent solution.
Bobby,
Yeah.
the officer said that he had to move him after.
That's what we heard, that the current process, that is decided centrally what facility and what housing, and including what housing area the person is going to go to, or just the facility?
For the most part, it's the facility to where they'll go. But there are times and certain situations where we will go as far as actually pick the housing unit. But for facility assignment, we pick the facility.
I think our concern, was that negotiation level at the facility level just puts RNDC at a. You're always begging instead of having a central management say this is where you're going and this is the unit that you're going to, and then you can spend time on other work and not be behind in that negotiation.
And again, that's part of the refinement and the education.
So that is
and the
coming
knowledge
forward.
bases. That is in place, yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Nora. I just got lost on that.
Okay, whoever's the best to answer this, please. I do see some really good progress being made towards reestablishing a young adult plan, so I'm really heartened by that, and I understand about 68% now of young adults, and you've got a little over 600, are in RNDC right now. It's all the 18-year-olds, but just a little bit over the majority with respect to the 19 to 21-year-olds. So I think many of us would agree to meet the unique needs of young adults to help reduce violence. And in my opinion, racial and economic equality demands that we give these young people the tools that they need, which includes education, programming, mental health, health care, age-appropriate housing with specially trained officers, and recreation, indoor and outdoor. Is there a reason that you ask for the variance repeatedly over and over and over again for only the 19 to 21-year-olds, but not the 18-year-olds? Because our housing cohort for young adults is 18 to 21. It's only 19 to 21 because that's all you've asked for. So I'm just wondering why, for all the reasons we do this for the 18-year-olds, we don't do it in equal measure for the 19 to 21-year-olds.
Sure. Let me clarify. The department as a whole will not house an 18-year-old with anybody 22 and above.
Correct.
Under any circumstance.
Correct.
Unless it's a special medical or other type of situation. The department asked the variance for 19 to 21-year-olds because that's a population that we still want to be able to commingle. But the 18-year-olds are always housed with those inmates, or those persons in custody, 18 to 21. They will never be housed with anybody over 21, which is why we limit that variance. We're only seeking to be able to commingle those that are 19 to 21.
Yeah, but my question is why? If 18-year-olds are very similarly situated to the 19, 20, 21, that's what all the research shows us, that's what all the neuroscience shows us, that's what all the experts have told us. Is there a reason that you wish to apply all this wonderful work only to the 18-year-olds and not to more than just a majority, a simple majority of the 19 to 21-year-olds? Again, we had been at a point where we were in 75th percentile of 18 to 21-year-olds, and you all have separated out the 18-year-olds.
Well,
board standards don't do that.
No, I understand, but you also, just to understand is, Nunez also gets imposed with the 18-year-old
They
population.
require accountability.
Yes, they require the enhanced staffing levels and the tracking and monitoring of various, the management of this particular population.
So is it that you can't, I mean, is it a
No, it's-
resource
it's-
issue that you can't
it's-
offer
it's-
to the 19 to
it's not a
21-year-olds?
It's not a resource issue. It's, we want to maintain that cohorted population, the 18-year-olds, in one location to better manage the reporting out that Nunez requires and tracking of all the other requirements that go with it. So we will maintain them in RNDC to keep them together and better to monitor, track, and report out.
I guess, same question, but let me just ask it slightly different. Do you believe that the strategy using for 18-year-olds is a strategy that's working in terms of reduction in violence, in terms of engagement in program, in terms of engagement in services? Is that strategy working? And if it is that a strategy that should apply to the 19 to 21-year-olds?
Well, I don't necessarily believe it's the strategy that's working. It's how we manage that population with the 19 to 21-year-olds being similar within that kind of that age bracket, that,
right,
you know, under 21.
Right.
But we do find that we still need, okay, to be able to have that flexibility to manage a part of that particular age group, that 19 to 21-year-old, separate and apart from other young adults, and be able to manage them in a commingled environment.
I think it's something for us to think, particularly as we move
But
to the smaller system.
All the 18-year-olds are commingled with other 19 to 21-year-olds at RNDC. There are no separate 18-year-old housing units within RNDC. They are all commingled within that 18 to 21 cohort.
And I think just for historical perspective, it's important for everyone to be aware, especially some of our new board members, because the housing cohort of the Board of Correction in our standards was 16 to 18. So when the Department of Justice found that there were civil rights violations and excessive and unnecessary use of force against the 16 to 18-year-olds, there ultimately was a lawsuit, and we have the consent judgment. So you are bound by many more standards, reporting, and accountability on the 18-year-olds than you had been before. But the reason that they're separated and lumped in terms of the standards is because that was the prior housing cohort. Now our housing cohort is 18 to 21. It's not just the 18-year-olds. So many believe, and I'm one of those, that what applies to the 18-year-olds obviously was applied as a result of Nunez and the Department of Justice, but it's also because that's what the experts recommend as being in their best interest. Just like to see that applied to more of our other young adults, to give them the best tools, the best chance to succeed. Thank you.
I just want to endorse that. I mean, you're not putting the 18-year-olds in, you're not commingling them generally because that's not, because you're not doing it, and you don't have to do it because you create the program and support to take care of them in RNDC. Similarly, you could do that for the young adults, and it should be very rare that you're commingling. You know, it's up from 32 to 50-something right now. You say 68, but that's because all the 18-year-olds are not commingled. You know, it's not that this is a privilege, the young adult program. It's not a privilege. It is the program that the board has asked you to supply. The department has said previously that up to 50% is fine. I know you're doing much more than that right now, and you're committed to doing more than right now.
But it's complicated for people to not have any most of the dorms not have any programming, have any of these systems that you had developed in GMDC, or you have for the 18-year-olds. You have for 3 housing areas right now in RNDC, and I don't think, Warden, that that you'll be able to know who can stay there and who can go until you have all these programs and tablets and other support available. At which point, I hope that the situation endorses your commitment to keep people in RNDC.
Just to remind the board, we've blanketed RNDC with programming, services, and activities. We have SEO Family Services that, in conjunction with the DOE, we provide assistance going back into the community through the Work Readiness Program. We have the Peace and Yes Center up and running, and we have rolled out multiple modules of carpentry and automotive and digital literacy. We have education. So while there may be a percentage of that population that is not compelled or unmotivated to participate in the services and programming that's provided to them, we certainly are constantly looking at ways, whether it's through education specialists, through DOE in collaboration with them, of trying to motivate a population that typically and traditionally did not go to school in the public school system. So here they are, and they're in a concentrated building, and we are once again, all of us, confronted with a challenge of trying to motivate a certain cohort that was unmotivated before being detained to get them into school, and utilizing the resources, whether it's our external partnerships or internal staff, to motivate them. So please remember, we are blanketing this population with as much services as possible. Now, there is more to do. There is more collaboration to do with uniformed staff of how we can effectively communicate and motivate these young men to go to school and to participate in the services available to them. But I have to remind everyone, this is a very difficult job. They come in unmotivated, but for illicit means at times and other negative behavior, and we're trying to modify behavior in a correctional setting, and that takes a lot of work. And we have new leadership in that building, and we're all wrapping around this issue together to work together.
Thank you. And thank you very much for that comment. I just had a quick question on that. In the February 2019 variance request, DOC did commit along the lines you described to providing correction officers who work with young adults effective communication and motivational strategies training. And I'm just interested to know whether all officers who work with young adults have been trained. If not, how many, and what is the continuing training being provided along those lines? Thank you. And is that now part of the initial training for COs who work with young adults?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I would just like to add, because I think language matters, right? And I think if you see young people as unmotivated, your way in engaging them is going to be like, these are bad people, these are not good people. And I think these are young people who have been failed over and over and over and over again by the systems and the services that were supposed to be provided for them or be available to them since they were young. And so have they learned how to live in a system that has continuously failed them? Absolutely. So I just want to challenge us to really think about the language we use when we talk about young people, when we talk about people incarcerated as well.
Thank you. So we're going to move to a vote on the variance, and there are existing conditions on the variance. So I believe we will move first to a vote on the existing conditions. There's one existing condition.
Yep.
Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second. The commingling. Is there any discussion on the variance?
I just want to state, I know I ask a lot of questions and I make a lot of comments. I do support the variances today with respect to young adults, but I do support it with the understanding that our multi-year-old restrictive housing rulemaking is moving forward and is going to get completed by the end of the year. I think some of the advocates said, you know, some of these variances have been reissued like 10 times. And I know the enhanced supervision, the commingling, these were originally granted with the understanding we were moving into restrictive housing rulemaking and we would be dealing with all these issues. So I'm hoping that the DOC will continue to work with the board so we can propose these rules to the full board, get a vote, schedule it for CAPA, and this will be the last time we'll be asked to vote on the variances because we will have new regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to move to a vote on the condition. Mr. Regan.
Yes.
Dr. Safier. Mr. Perino.
Aye.
Mr. Hernandez.
Aye.
Yes. So the condition is included, and now we are ready to move to a vote on the variance with the condition. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Mr. Regan.
Yes.
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 Yes. By unanimous vote, the variance is approved.
Now we're moving to ESH. We're going to move on to the ESH discussion and variance. Since July 2016, the board has granted a variance that allows the department to house young adults in enhanced supervision housing. The board has worked closely with the department to monitor and improve the ESH model through these variances. I'd like to give significant thanks and praise to Victor St. John, Razim Gray, Kenneth Wong, and Mackenzie Deary on the board staff for their critical analyses of our young adult and ESH data to allow all of us to have a more informed and data-driven discussion. So to that end, here's some important context. In the first 4 months of 2019, there were 64 young adult placements into ESH, and of those 64 placements, 69% of people were placed into level 2, 16% of young people were placed into level 3, and 16% were placed into level 1 or a restraint desk unit. For all recent placements of a young person into a restraint desk unit, the young person had recently participated in an actual or attempted slashing or stabbing or engaged in activity that caused serious injury to someone else. Reviews and progressions have improved greatly since January. So between January 1 and May 1, there were 140 periodic reviews conducted by the department for young people in ESH, and in more than half of those cases, a recommendation for progression was made. And in all of those cases, the young people were subsequently moved. Additionally, in recent months, fewer young people spent any time at a restraint desk or in a restraint desk unit as compared with young people who had exited the program in the prior 4 months. The percentage of young people who spent time at restraint desks has continued to decrease consistently since 2017, and in recent months show a sharp decline. We've published the department's required recent audits of ESH units on our website, and these show significant declines in the number of reported late lockouts in the ESH units, which is also significant progress. They show that an average of 68% of young people are also refusing recreation offers in ESH on the audited days. In terms of law library, the coordinator has been available on average about 4 hours per day in the ESH units, and an average of 11 young people were requesting law library services on the audited dates. The audits also show that while young people are entitled to 3 hours of school a day while they are enrolled, in April, the students averaged 2 hours of school per day. So the department has requested a 6-month renewal of the ESH, the young adult ESH variance, and if you would kindly present that request and any updates.
Yes.
Thank you.
Acting Assistant Chief Williams. Good morning to the board.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Looks like it's on. I think it's
Check,
on.
check, check. Good. Yes. The department and the board, we share the same overall objectives to create and support a correctional setting that's safe, humane, produces positive outcomes. Since
You have to-
2014.
You have to speak into the
Can you
mic.
hear me, man? I'm sorry, Judge.
Yeah, you have to pull the mic a little closer.
Since 2014, the department has undertaken a number of reforms to dramatically reduce the use of punitive SAG. ESH is an important tool that enables the department to manage some of the most violent individuals in an appropriate manner, provides them with educational and pro-social programming. The individuals are reviewed at irregular intervals by a multidisciplinary team that includes uniformed staff, social service providers, and programming staff, as well as the individual himself, to determine if the individual is ready to progress to a less restrictive level or back to GP housing. As of the current variant periods, reviews are conducted in level 1 are conducted every 15 days, while reviews for individuals in level 2 and 3 are conducted every 21 days. Number of young adults in ESH as of 7/1/2019, as our commissioner stated earlier. As of today, we have 1 in level 1, we have 10 in level 2, and we have 4 in level 3 with a total of 15. That is a significant decrease in ESH pertaining to January of earlier this year. We feel that it is definitely necessary because most of the inmates that were placed in level 1 were placed in there primarily for slashing and stabbing events. So for the good order and safety and security of the facility, we definitely wish to keep and maintain this variance to definitely protect staff, non-uniform staff, and definitely the school people, because school is very important. Me and my team under my purview have always taught a lot. I've taught with Dr. Cohen, and our mantra is always to speak to the young adults to try to get a different mindset, to have them know that level 1 ESH or ESH is not a place that you really want to be. So we preach for them to go to school and utilize the tools that's given to them programmatically to ensure that this is not something that they continually do. And we've seen great success, definitely in OPCC, with that in level 1, 2, and 3. And they're moving through the levels at a very, very good pace. Yes. Anything?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Simple question.
Yes.
One, I think that the progress that's been made in the ESH, as the commissioner spoke about initially, as you've reiterated and as the board is aware, was something that was done, collaboratively. Although you only have one person in a restraint desk right now. Why do they have to be restrained? I think what this progress has demonstrated is, one, that the board and the department can negotiate and work well together, but two, this is an unnecessary practice, and that ESH with restraint desks was a project that the board was not aware of, that the department just threw, the department put into place without consulting the board. We would never have approved letting young adults into ESH, which was part of the getting rid of segregation for young people, if the board had known that you were going to put people into restraint desks. So given the very, very few numbers of people involved, and your capacity beginning in the very near future for further ways of detecting weapons, why do you need to continue this project?
So as I've discussed with board members before, it's a matter of policy. We believe it's a necessary tool to keep everybody safe. Regardless of whether we have 1 or 10, you maintain fidelity to the program. Because when you don't, that's when you run into problems. We've talked about having a tool that you don't need to use until you need to use it. So as I referenced to the board before in conversations, when I was a police officer, I carried a firearm. I only needed that firearm twice in 8 years. By the logic you just proposed, I should have had my firearm taken away from me because I didn't need to use it. In medical situations, don't always use the tools that you used 10 years ago, but you don't get rid of them because they're not useful in an emergency situation. The desk is a tool to use with violent individuals who can only come out and be with others when they're in a situation where they can't reach others. As Chief Williams explained, he and his staff routinely go around and speak with the young people in ESH and in other housing units to discourage them from engaging in behavior that will get them to the desk. So it's as much as a tool to use to keep people safe as also a deterrent to others. Just like speeding fines are a deterrent to those of us who don't want to pay a fine for speeding. It's part of behavior modification in a way that you have a carrot and a stick.
But, and not to Bobby's question, but a different question. And if EHS is working, and I think it is it possible for us to eliminate punitive seg and do more of EHS, being that it is a model that has accountability for someone's action, it's infused with services, and this is really a planning question, right? As we move with all of the stuff that's going on with closed Rikers and we go to the smaller borough-based facilities, is that a tool that we should be thinking about that would allow us to move away from punitive seg?
So that's a conversation for another day, but what I will say about ESH is the criteria for entrance into that restrictive housing is very specific: slashing, stabbing, serious injury. The admission criteria into punitive seg is an adjudicated process, and it can be for a multitude of infractions, not just violence.
Right. And so should we as a board be thinking about revising what the criteria is to enter, if that would give us a way of eliminating punitive seg? If EHS is working, if we all agree that like EHS is the model that has behavior modification, it has accountability, it provides safety for the officers and folks who work there, it provides opportunities for those detained to engage in services so they don't have to repeat the behavior. If we really think that model is working, should we be doing more of it? And I guess this is really a reflective question as we move forward, but this is an opportunity for us. We've heard from a number of people about the impact of solitary confinement. We hear what they're saying on a national level. Should we take this opportunity to rethink the way we're doing EHS so that we could eliminate punitive seg?
Well, I believe we can have those conversations in the rulemaking process. It's obviously not topic for today's variance, but I want to remind the board and everyone else that we are a leader right now in the country in the reduction and elimination of certain punitive segregation for populations within our jail system.
Yep, absolutely.
I have a question. I think in your report to us, you said that restraints are not being used for people in non-ESH 1 level while in school, but it is our observation that they are. Could you help us understand that? Are people who are in level 2 and 3 restrained at restraint desks when they go to school?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Cohen.
Good morning, Chief.
Bureau Chief Kenneth Stokes. Yes, we have had some information revealed us through an inquiry that individuals who are in level 2 and level 3 who are not per the policy to be restrained to the programming desk with restraints, based on some of the documentation that we have received thus far, there have been occasions where level 2 and 3 individuals were in restraint desks and restraints were utilized. That was not the expectation of the executive team. The facility, when they made those decisions to deviate from our expectations, that information should have been conferred with the executive leadership. That issue is and has been addressed, and it will be handled.
Thank you.
So we're going to move to a vote on the variance, and there are conditions to the variance. So first we will vote on the existing conditions to the variance. Does a board member move to vote on the conditions?
Move.
Thank you. Vote. Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Dr. Safier? Mr. Perino? Mr. Hernandez?
Yes.
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 Yes, thank you. So now we'll move to if there's any discussion on the existing conditions.
We just approved the condition, so it's on the
So now we'll move to, yes, thank you. Now we'll move to the vote on the variance with the existing conditions.
Yes?
Yeah, I just want brief discussion. I just
Well-
want to urge my fellow board members to vote against this, that the use of restraint desks are not necessary. They're humiliating. They're torturous. They're not something that we should have in New York City. And I think the department has demonstrated through a very carefully developed process over several years that they really don't need them, and we should not be endorsing this practice. So I'm going to be voting against it and urge you to join.
Any other discussion? We'll move to a vote. Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Dr. Sapir? Mr. Perino?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Yes, pending rulemaking.
No.
And yes, the variance.
But it's really important, and Judge Hamill, this rulemaking thing, we listened to and read this week advocates and elected officials talking about this very, very, very important issue. And rulemaking is the answer. You know, Councilwoman Carlino was here, Councilmember Powers and the Speaker have reached out to us. We look forward to rulemaking.
Yep.
Yes, thank you. We're going to move on to the third variance.
In September 2015, the board first granted a variance from minimum standard 117D2 to allow the department, in highly exceptional circumstances presenting safety concerns, to waive the requirement that people in custody be immediately released from punitive segregation for 7 days after they have been held in segregation for 30 consecutive days. The board has renewed this variance multiple times, each time on the condition that the chief of department must approve each waiver and state why placement in a less restrictive setting is not a safe option. Since the board's last approval of this variance, there have been 0 requests for a 7-day waiver. And the department, Chief, please present your request.
Yes, good morning again. On July the 2nd of 2019, the department submitted a 6-month limited variance renewal pending rulemaking to maintain the ability to place inmates who have spent 30 days in punitive segregation back in punitive segregation during the 7-day period following their release. The last variance renewal was granted on January the 8th, 2019, and is set to expire, which would be on yesterday, July the 8th, 2019. The department requested an emergency 1-day variance renewal as to extend the current variance through the July 9th BOC meeting, where the 6-month variance renewal can be voted on. Approval of the 7-day variance with regards to being placed back in punitive segregation is approved by the chief of the department, whereas it is a vigorous process where alternative means of management is explored. Since we've been granted this variance, 39 have been submitted, 29 have been approved, 10 has been disapproved. Of the 39, 27 of the incidents occurred upon within 7 days of being released from punitive segregation. 2 occurred during punitive segregation time. For the calendar year of 2019, there have been 0 requests for overrides with regards to the 7-day placement. And the last override request was in October of 2018.
Thank you. Are there questions, discussion?
No, you go ahead. No, I was going to discuss. Well, just, I think we heard in the, at the beginning of this meeting, from the city council, from concerned citizens, from people who have been tortured in solitary confinement, that it's not a good idea.
And, you know, I don't think there's any need for this variance. You don't use it. If you were using it, there are lots of other places where you could keep people in a non-solitary setting. I don't understand why the department, I mean, you said, actually I didn't hear you explain why this is necessary, but I have not been, you know, I don't understand the necessity of this thing, since there are many other places on Rikers Island, in NYC, in the West facility, in Manhattan House, where you can safely keep people in this period where they're not going to be, you know, affecting anybody else for that 7 days. The notion that what the department really needs is to extend, you know, solitary confinement to up to 60 days doesn't seem to be the appropriate response in this moment.
If I may, Dr. Cohen,
Yes.
with regards to the 7-day release, I think that our data will show that it is a necessary tool that we need with regards to inmate management. And with regards to when the requests are made, they are made based on the presence of individuals that have committed serious violations, slashing, stabbings, and or serious injuries to inmate or staff. I think that our data presents that it is a tool that is needed for inmate behavior. However, we only use it when it is absolutely necessary. So I would disagree with the fact that we don't need it. It is a tool that is much essential during our operation with regards to balancing our agency with regards to inmate management.
So I just want to, and I think y'all deserve some acknowledgement on this front. When I joined the board in 2015, it was something like over 500 people in punitive seg. And over the years, in collaboration with the board and the department and community advocates, we've seen that number come down, both in terms of population, the number of people who cycle in and out of the system, the number of people who are detained in our city jails, and the number of people who are in punitive
Absolutely.
seg.
As of our data on yesterday, sorry for cutting you off,
Yeah.
there are 80 individuals in punitive segregation.
So that's where I'm going, right? We need to acknowledge that. We also heard today many advocates continue to talk about the damage that punitive seg makes. And for the last year, from January 2018 to today, June 2019, you used it once. And that you should be commended for, because it was a tool that we gave. It was a tool that we had grave concerns about whether it would be overused. And the department came to us when you came with this variance, said, we need this tool, but we're going to try not to use it. And I agree. I wish someday that we will get to a place where we won't need it. But I am really satisfied that the department has been not using this tool, even though you have it at your disposal. So I want to acknowledge that, because I think we need to acknowledge it. And this is a time where I think we are at a point where we could move even further, take that 80 down to 0, and increase perhaps EHS, because we need to do it. It's the right thing to do. But congratulations on bringing it down.
Thank you.
I see that under this variance is also a discussion of DOC's implementation in terms of the agenda. So I'd like to ask about that, because if we're considering the waiver, I'd like to know what solitary is actually looking like right now. So we know that there's the new rule from the state with respect to out-of-cell time for all of those who are in solitary confinement, what you call punitive segregation. Can you tell us how that is actually operating right now?
Yes, so during the latter weeks of June, the agency began to implement affording individuals who were in punitive segregation with 4 hours out of cell time. The 4 hours of cell time included 2 hours of recreation, 1 hour in programming space, and 1 hour for showers being afforded to all the individuals. What had happened at the facility level is there were schedules that were made up to ensure that there were not conflicts for the most part, so individuals didn't have to choose one of the other. So the most increase would have been recreation, that each individual would be afforded 2 hours of recreation daily, their option to choose. So with that, a additional supervisor was added to the facility staff, and 5 correctional officers to ensure that we have the ability to afford each individual who wished to participate with recreation the 2 hours. In addition, we add a supervisor who is dedicated, who's assigned to one of the units to afford individuals who wish to be afforded time in the programming space that opportunity. To date, we have had some nuances to correct. It is new. Also, with the tracking of this services being provided to the individuals, we created, added some enhancements to our web application, which was a part of the Intro 292. So all the services that are provided, we utilize resources and had pre-printed logbooks that documents all the services that are afforded to the individuals. That would be recreation, showers, programming space time, barbershop, religious service, visits, and those are the source of what will provide an individual with up to 4 hours out of cell time. Most of the individuals, myself, on behalf of the Chief of the Department, Chief Jennings, and the executive team, we are required to conduct tours in those units as instructed by the Chief of the Department. Myself and all my supervisors assigned to my office are required to tour there. The Bureau Chief of Facility Operations and her staff are required to make tours there for efficiencies. The division chief, who recently spoke, Assistant Chief Williams, that's his facility, Georgia Arboreal Center. Him and his staff are required to make tours there because of the fact that it's new, to support and to assist the facility and provide whatever guidance is needed to ensure that we are complying with these standards. Periodically, we are required to take copies of the pre-printed logbooks and do random audits to ensure that not only that the staff are affording the services, we can from time to time do random genotech spot checks to see what is going on in the unit as it pertains to individuals being afforded showers or being afforded access into the programming space.
Okay, just a couple follow-ups. In terms of the recreation is still in those single cages, is that correct?
Recreational holding pens, yes.
Okay, and what is it that the person in custody can actually do in that holding pen?
Inside the pens, they could work out, do push-ups, do jumping jacks, basic exercise. There are not any modifications into the holding pens as far as weights, pull-up bars, or dip bars. None of that are in the recreational holding pens.
Do the 2 hours have to be consecutive, or is it broken up during the day so they can go out an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon?
No, due to the fact that it's scheduled so that it's conflict, so we are able to afford all individuals the opportunity to participate, it is scheduled. When we take you out and you participate, your 2 hours starts then.
Okay, so you have up to 2 hours.
Yes.
Yes, and do they have access to water and restrooms during their 2 hours if they wish to exercise?
If an
2 full
individual
hours?
if the individual requests to be returned back to the unit for the purpose of utilizing the facilities, that request is to be adhered to.
And then they can go back out to continue recreation, or does that end their 2 hours?
It is to the discretion. That is not written, that once an individual returns, that we as an agency does not have the ability to return them back out to the recreational area. With regards to water, there are Cambros that's taken out to the area because there is not an operable water facility outside in that area. So the water and ice is carried outside at the present time in the Cambros.
All right, and then I have a question about the 1 hour shower. I understand this might seem a little silly. I just have a hard time imagining somebody standing for an hour to take a shower. I mean, that's a really, really long time. So a couple of questions about it. One, how many persons in custody are actually exercising their right to stand in the shower for an hour? And does the water have to be running, or if they just want to be in a different space and it happens to be the shower, then they can stay there for the hour?
So it varies from each individual. So there are individuals who, when they are afforded the ability to take a shower, that stays in the shower for an hour or sometime longer. Then there are individuals who wish to just come in and perform or take a shower and return to their living quarters. But that is the interpretation of what we have codified as an hour. So if someone wishes to stay for an hour, they have the ability to do that. We will not resort to extracting them from the showers prior to that time.
Okay, and just, again, this sounds a little silly, but does the water have to be running? Or if you've been in solitary and locked up for 23 hours, just being at a different space might be a welcome change for the person. So do they actually
Yes.
have to be showering, or can they just
So
be
the individual
standing
has the
or sitting
ability
in the
to
space?
control the water flow, so many of them will turn it off. And if there's someone in the adhering shower next to them that they communicate with, they will stand there and communicate. So
they
the
can
water doesn't
remain
have to be
there.
running.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank
Yes.
you.
And just a question on the audit. When you conduct your audit, what are you looking for?
So when we conduct the randomized, what we are looking for is looking at the participation in recreational services. Inside the pre-printed logbooks, it has a start time that the individual is taken out to the recreational area and a return time, which gives us the ability to see whether he stayed for an hour or he stayed out for 2 hours. And the same would apply for visits. When you look to see if an individual went to a family visit, it would show time he departed and went to the visit, the time he returned.
And the same thing for the shower.
Yes.
Thank you.
Chief Stukes,
Yes.
do you have data, information that you've been collecting right now you could report to us regarding how many showers a week people are actually taking, independent of your offering it to them each day? That's one. Two, how many people are attending recreation from, who are in solitary confinement? As I understand it, just if you could just confirm or clarify this, in order to go to recreation, you have to be strip searched before and after you go to recreation and on return. And how many people are going to recreate in these solitary cages without any equipment?
So
bathrooms?
I haven't done any analysis of the data at this point to determine how many people go each day, but I know that it varies, and I have made tours out in the recreational area, and I've seen upwards of 20+ individuals out in the area. So the individual
20 people at one time in
at one time out in the.
How many cages are up
there? There are 30 recreational holding pens out in the recreational area. And with regards to the second part regarding the ability to track the amount of individuals and the services that they participated on, that is where we have added some enhancements to our web application of Intro 292, where all the services that are provided to the individuals on the following day, there's a staff member assigned to the facility who is required to make copies of that logbook and input that data into the web application. Members of the executive team, wardens, deputy wardens, assistant chiefs, bureau chiefs, the chief of the department, and other high-level officials have access to this web application. So at any time, you can log on to the application and click on to see. I'll give an example. If you click on myself, if Stukes is in GRVC and participate with the services, when you click on my name after the member have input all the data, you could see if I went to rec, what time I went out, what time I returned. If I went to the shower, how long I stayed out. If I had a family visit, when did I leave, when I returned. So the web application kind of mimicked what is documented in the pre-printed logbooks that's in the housing area.
I assume the board will have access to that data as well.
I'm sorry?
I assume the board will have access to that data as well.
Yes.
Do you have any racial data in terms of who is in segregation right now?
I don't have that data at my fingertips, Dr. Cohen.
Thank you.
We're going to move to a vote on the variance. Will a board member move to vote on the requested 6-month variance to allow the department in highly exceptional circumstances presenting safety and security concerns to waive the requirement that people in custody be immediately released from punitive segregation for 7 days after they've been held in punitive segregation for 30 consecutive days. And I note there are existing conditions on this variance, so we will vote on the conditions first and then on the variance with conditions. Is there a motion to vote on the conditions?
Second.
Member Regan?
Yes.
Savior?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So the conditions are included. Is there any discussion on any further discussion on the variance with conditions?
I just want to say that I will support the variance, but again, this is pending rulemaking because these are issues that are actually in consideration for rulemaking and we have proposed rules on. So again, I hope you won't have to come back to us in 6 months, that the rulemaking will be completed.
Thank you. Is there a motion to vote on the variance with conditions?
Second.
Mr. Regan?
Yes, and as I recall, Chief, the Chief of Department's not here today, your numbers show such judiciousness and thoughtfulness as you approach these very serious decisions, and I just wanted to say that out loud.
Thank you.
The conditions didn't require you to have this additional staff. The conditions didn't require you to make managerial decisions that require chiefs, including Chief Williams, to inspect what's going on here. You're taking this seriously, and I'm voting yes. Thank you.
Yes.
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 No, we should not be asking, allowing the department to put people into solitary confinement for 60 days.
That's not as I experienced this vote.
And I vote yes. The variance with conditions is approved. So the next items on the agenda are 2 correctional health service variance requests. The board has renewed both variances every 6 months for some years. In 2017, the board voted unanimously to prepare to integrate these variances into minimum standards, and the board is committed to doing this as soon as capacity allows.
Since you're up here already, do you want to present the request
Since I'm up
to
here
start?
already, on behalf of CHS, I'd also like to acknowledge Martha King and her leadership. Many of our staff remember the inspiring example of Dr. Lambert King, and we're grateful to you for following in his footsteps. If you'd like me to discuss these, I'd be happy to.
Yes.
So we're presenting 2 continuing variances. The first is a variance from mental health minimum standards that allows our psychiatrists to prescribe psychotropic medications on a 28-day schedule, which is more reflective of community practice, and that's only for stable patients in general population areas. So for patients in mental observation units, the standard remains that those medications would be renewed every 14 days. And we present, as we always do, data that demonstrates that for our patients in general population, there is a mix of 14 and 28-day renewals, which reflects the clinical acuity of those cases.
I just have just a question which is related to it. I'm going to vote and encourage all of us to support this variance request. But could you provide to the board information regarding your testimony at the City Council on serious mental illness? I understand we talked about this earlier, that you have expanded your definition of SMI, and that there was also an increase in the number of people, the percentage of people who are characterized as SMI. Could you please provide us, not today, but the new definition, any training that curriculum that was provided to staff regarding this new definition, and how from day 0 to day +1 the percentage increased based upon the new definition of people characterized as SMI in the department?
Sure, we'd be happy to share.
Thank you.
Any discussion? Motion? Can I get a motion?
Move the item.
Second?
Second.
Let's do a roll vote.
Yes.
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 Yes. It passed. Let's go to the second variance.
Okay. And the second variance is to the medical minimum standards, which allows us to use an alternative mechanism of screening for latent tuberculosis on admission. So we've been using now for many years the interferon gamma release assay instead of the TST or tuberculin skin test.
Any discussion?
Just want to endorse it.
Endorse it. Let's get a motion.
So move.
Second. Roll vote. Mr. Reagan.
Yes.
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 Unanimously passed. We're gonna, both variances passed.
Because of the timing, the next item on the agenda is a very important one that I want to make sure gets enough attention, and that is staff wellness and DOC's recent investment in that issue in that area. We're going to make the decision to move that to the next meeting because of the time. I know you've prepared a great presentation for today, but we can expand upon that at the next meeting. And we'll move to the public comment, the final public comment for today.
Perfect. The first up is Elias. And I think before we move there, the staff wellness is really an important piece of what the department's doing, and I think we ought to recognize that. I'm a firm believer in the health and wellness of those in authority will be manifested in those with lesser authority. And so as we prepare for this new vision of this borough-based system, I think it's critically important to think about all the stakeholders involved in this system. And I'm looking forward to the presentation. I heard one of the board members saying he did a tour at the wellness, and I want to go out there and take a look at it. And I heard really good things about it, and looking forward to the presentation. So first up is Elias. Elias is not here. Winston, I can't pronounce the last name. Okay. Winston.
Is it still morning? Barely. Good morning, everyone. Okay, so I didn't receive any response from the department for the complaints that I had last time. I don't know why I was surprised by that, but I was. Maybe I'm a little naive. Anyway, so I filed my petition this morning. So I put in an Article 78 proceeding that I'm going to ask my friend to serve the commissioner with in a second. But before I do that, since I have a little bit of time here, in that proceeding, one of the things that I am challenging is the department has a habit of censoring the Daily News. The Daily News is one of the newspapers that is delivered to inmates at Rikers. It censors things. Things, for example, like the day after the April 1st budget was passed in New York State, there was a lot of changes that will be coming in January for discovery, for no cash bail, for things like that would have been important to the inmates at Rikers who will be directly experiencing them. Those 4 pages out of the Daily News were censored. They were completely removed. Now, within the Board of Corrections minimum standards, I know that it gives specific examples of things that should be censored, things that are dangers to the safety of the facility. And it gives 2 examples. One is the manufacture of weapons, and I think the other is something like escape plans. And it says other things, but the level of criteria for things being censored is fairly high. And I'm assuming that the Daily News was not publishing those types of things in its reporting on the April budget bill of New York State. Other things that I've seen censored are articles about Elizabeth Warren. I don't know how she feels about that. I was released in May. I'm going to assume maybe the type of thing that would be censored are things like the campaign that Tiffany Gaban had to run for not public advocate, for the Queen's DA. So this I'm including in my Article 78 proceeding because I think it's an example of going beyond the legal authority that the commissioner has. What I would like to ask the Board of Corrections to do is there's a directive that the department has that allows the board to look at all of its papers. My understanding is that the department only censors things in the daily news, the staff only censors things that they are told to censor, that an email comes up. This is going to go against my undue familiarity with staff, but this is my understanding, that it's only, because other papers are not censored. The Spanish language papers are not censored. The New York Times, which I received every day, was not censored. Only things are being emailed, the pages are being told to be ripped out, only those things are being censored. So I'd like to ask the board to access those emails and maybe publicize them. Because I'm sure our friends in the media who are here are probably going to put in a freedom of information request anyway, and this might just be faster. And I'd like to use that as evidence in my Article 78 proceeding. I also need access to my own grievances because the department has misplaced my property since I was released from court. So I don't have access to all of my own documents. So if the board could help me with that as well, I'd appreciate it. I have copies of this for you guys, but if my friend wouldn't mind. I realize I can't serve it myself. I didn't realize that. I didn't know I couldn't serve the papers myself. So my friend is going to, if you don't mind, my friend's going to serve you this now, and then if anyone else needs a copy, we'll do that.
You can give it to, yeah, Heidi.
My understanding was it just had to be a person above 18 to serve it. Let's do this now, then I'll do it again later.
So Winston, we're going to call up the next speaker.
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Cynthia Tucker.
Good morning to the panel and to the people behind me. Excuse my back. I am so grateful to be here this morning because I am a mother of an incarcerated son who just got beat up at Sing Sing. But he's in protected custody at Sullivan because he was attacked. He was cut in his finger, cut underneath here, black eye and whatnot. But he is in the SHU. Why? He's in protected custody. 7 guys jumped him, but the officers, they came to the rescue. He said, Mommy, I was so glad that they came. Got pepper sprayed and all that. But I'm not understanding why you're in the SHU. Why are you under protected custody in a SHU when you was attacked? So I'm not understanding. So I'm so glad that this is a board I have never met, but remember my face, please, and hear that my sons and everyone else that go in the SHU need to not be in the SHU. He's being the investigator is coming back and forth until they come to the decision of what? I'm not understanding. Because he had officers commending him. Oh, yeah, you took 7 down. Really? You took 7 people down, but you sent him to Sullivan and put him in the SHU. He was not been in the SHU the first time. This is again because before he was in the SHU, he got in there because he had too much on his plate that they put him in the SHU. So when are we going to stop this mass incarceration of putting people in the SHU? You're saying 7 days out? Shouldn't even be 7 days in. It shouldn't be even the 24 hours if you're doing an investigation. We need help. I'm looking at your faces. Please look at mine. Because of the simple fact, I am a mother asking for help. I am a sister asking for help because my brother is in Wyoming and he has no hearing and they're giving him sentences and trying to put him in a suit. Why? Because he can't follow direct order from behind him because the officer told him, oh, no, you're not deaf. But legally on paper, he's deaf because they awarded him and he have hearing aids. When are we going to get some help? I'm with HALT. And you know what HALT means to me? Help others live today. We need that. We need your help. We need it so reverently right now. Not tomorrow, but right now. So you're going to vote, you're going to help us. We need these. It's too many people being incarcerated in a SHU. For what reason? Could you tell me why? It said, we the people, of the people. Well, who are the people? For which we stand to what nation? Could you give me the answer? What nation that we're standing on that we can't help one another? that everyone has to go into incarcerating and being sentenced over sentences. I have officers that told me in Wyoming they moved to Wendy's because they were not going to sentence somebody that already was sentenced again for being nasty. So please help. We really need it. I really need it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Tucker. And Ms. Tucker, if you would like to speak with board staff, they may be able to provide individual assistance with issues around your son. Thank you. Ms. V?
Hi, I'm Ms. V from the Urban Justice Center, and I've actually spoken to you before the board in many different settings from different things. So I'm attached to the Jails Action Coalition. I've been that since 2011. Martha, sorry to see you go. But today I'm actually speaking to you as a Brad H. monitor. And I just want to talk about several things that I've been seeing occur throughout different facilities when I go to do monitoring. For example, many of the conditions are horrendous. Just last month, I was at Brooklyn House, and usually, you know, you have to go through certain things where DOC will be hesitant in actually getting you to the spot to begin the interviews. But I'm always polite and professional, and no matter what they throw my way, whether there's a lack of an escort, even though they know days in advance that we're coming, whether there's a lack of an escort or anything, I will always say, that's fine, I have no problem in waiting. A lot of times I'll get excuses of where this service is being done in the chapel, the area that they want me to go, and I say, no problem, that's fine, I have all day, I will wait, because I have my clients to meet with. And once, for example, when I got to Brooklyn House Chapel, after waiting, being told there was no escort to take us upstairs, that there was Catholic services being done, there was actually no one in the chapel, and there were no Catholic services being done. When I went to the chaplain's office to begin my interviews, it was 2 workspaces, and one of them was completely unavailable because the rain had come down and was all over the desk and the floor. And I proceeded for the next 5 to 6 hours to conduct interviews in a space that clearly smelled of mold, and I left with my entire left side being rained on as if I had stood outside in the rain. And I mention that because DOC is supposed to provide a safe space, a space that is where you're not being rained on, to actually conduct these interviews with our clients. And many clients spoke about not being brought for medical visits. Many clients spoke about, and this is even follow-up visits that the doctors themselves had actually put on paper to take someone off island to like Bellevue or Amherst for follow-up visits, for deeper treatment, not being reported taken. Many people report being attacked in their unit, and I've actually saw like different slashes and things, and no real follow-up. I've seen many broken hands and not being really followed up, and so it's being healed in twisted positions and different things like that. There was a lot of reports given about people not being produced on time for meds. A lot of different reasons was maybe a court visit, but that does not mean that someone who went to court is not entitled to their I'm not done. But there's, Sarita, I actually have someone who's yielding her time for the next one, but there's many people who report coming back from court and not actually being given their meds. And in the last month I had 2 different individuals actually show documentation that they shouldn't be in certain units because doctors have already said, like due to asthma or certain things or the severity of it, that they need to be in facilities with AC. And just this week, I actually met a young man who actually fell into that category, who was in a unit on Rikers with no AC, and the doctors was supposedly saying to him, well, you just have to wait until someone else moves you. Also, many people, well, for example, I'll say several individuals have also mentioned not getting proper medication and actually being transferred from different buildings. I noticed that was the thing. When people are being transferred from one facility to another facility, sometimes medications will run out. And several times I've had clients tell me that the medication was stopped for things like anxiety or PTSD. One client even said he hadn't received his medication since May 25th, and the reason was because his prescription was up. Yet there's many staff around that should be able to write a new prescription. That is absolutely no reason for someone to be put into a place of possible decompensation because someone didn't want to take the time to write a new script. And there's many times that people are saying they are not being produced for programming or medical calls or mental health counseling. And so when we talk about the safety in a facility and we eliminate those things that actually would assist in bringing down the level of incidents maybe, we have to hold DOC accountable. And something else, DOE actually gave a report at the advisory board last month, and one thing I noticed that, this is not Brad H., one thing I noticed that was very important to me to bring up is that students with disabilities had a higher use of force. So I would like the board to follow up on that as well. Y'all have a blessed day.
Thank you very much.
And I will be speaking next month on what I brought up last month about the clergy being removed out of the building. I waited because y'all put it on for next month with the wellness and all that stuff. But I do have a copy of the petitions that I mentioned last month that DOC uniform and non-uniform staff has signed and submitted, and not an agreement of removing clergy, the chaplains, out of the facilities into one space. But I'll be submitting that to the board as well. Y'all have a blessed day.
Thank you very much. Mary Lynn Whirlwas.
Good afternoon. I think I'm the caboose in the comment period. Mary Lynn Whirlwas of the Legal Aid Society Prisoners' Rights Project. Not long ago, this room and most of the public spaces that we inhabited in our city probably would have been filled with secondhand smoke. And we might not have been surprised if you were smoking, if I was smoking while I stood up here. And we minimized the health risks and we considered it an ordinary part of life. It would look crazy today because when we know better, we do better. And we know that the science of the harms of prolonged solitary confinement can no longer be ignored. The fact that the department considers solitary confinement an ordinary part of correctional practice for 25 years can't mitigate these stubborn health facts that we now know. We can do better and we need to do better. I know that this board took very affirmative steps several years ago to make inroads in the excesses of curbing solitary confinement, and the department did as well. But we haven't gone far enough. Those have not stopped what we know is the harm being visited upon people by solitary confinement. The Legal Aid Society wants to ratify the powerful voices of our colleagues who have spoken today about their own experiences and about the moral harms that are being perpetrated today. And we're just going to identify just 3 channel markers to guide us moving forward. First, stop using terms like therapeutic and supportive to describe punitive conditions. Institutions lose the trust of the people they serve when they debase language with Orwellian doublespeak. Call therapy, therapy, call punishment, punishment, and develop sound evidence-based practices for both. Second, as Ms. V noted, air conditioning. It's hot outside. When we all leave this building, we are going to be sweating. Very few of the jail cells are air conditioned. And it is a false to claim that so too are many apartments in New York City. In the jails, you can't drag your mattress to the fire escape. You can't open the windows for a cross breeze. This is by design of the fire safety plan of compartmentalization and the correctional plan of locking people in so they cannot access the cooling showers, the ice that protect you from heat-related illnesses. This board must not allow people to be housed or locked into cells that are not air conditioned during these hot months, and must monitor carefully the promises that people are afforded access to showers. Lastly, let's not simply talk about solitary as lock-in, lock-out hours. That's an important metric, but it's very limited. As we heard today, what counts as locked-out is not meaningful engagement with other human beings. It's not meaningful programming. It's simply attending some bodily functions is not what we mean by ending solitary, whether it goes by punitive segregation, restrictive housing, ESH, room confinement, protective custody. The torture by isolation has to end today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That concludes public comment for today. I think Martha has an announcement.
This doesn't work. Is this working? So the board had placed a requirement on a variance last month regarding ACS, and they needed to submit an update on their contract for wraparound services for pregnant young women and new parents, and that update will be published on our website this afternoon.
Thank you, Martha. And this meeting is adjourned. The board's next meeting is scheduled for September 10th at 9 a.m. back in this auditorium. Thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your summer.